Hey friends! In doing some cleanup, I discovered that episode 469 was recorded and published on my website, but never published on the download feed for the podcast. So without further ado, I present you a bonus episode that you missed in the original production, probably, number 469, Cottage Garden, Blank Slate, A Study in Emerald, 2nd edition. Enjoy.
Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon or good morning. It is a lovely day here in suburban Chicago. It is a cloudless, bright day with the sun rising. This morning it was in the low 60s. I would say it's in the mid or high 60s now. I bet it's going to be 80 by the end of the day. It's one of those days, but it looks beautiful. Well, we're cresting, I think this is episode 469, so we're almost to the last 30 episodes of the season, and the last two episodes I did not talk about new games I'd played, which means it's time for another episode of Shooting from the Hip Triple Shot. As is usually the case with this episode, I am introducing 3 games that I tried for the first time recently and sharing my thoughts on them. One of them is a little bit different than the others, but I'll explain that as it comes up. So the first game that I want to talk about today is the Uwe Rosenberg game, Cottage Garden. Now, Cottage Garden is from the Stronghold series, the Stronghold Great Masters series, which I don't know if you followed the publication of those games, but with the exception of Great Western Trail, I feel like every one of the Stronghold Great Masters series games don't end up being one of the top games of those masters. I mean, certainly a fair number of people played Cottage Garden when it came out, but of the 3 games Rosenberg made in that series, you have, I don't think it's called Indian Summer, might be Indian Summer. We have Cottage Garden and we have Spring something. And the Spring one is the one that I hear people talk about the most. That's the one about melting snow. But all 3 of those seem to be kind of preludes to A Feast for Odin, and A Feast for Odin is generally much more well received. But Cottage Garden was the second of these. It was part of the Stronghold's Great Designer series, and the premise is that you are gardening. There is a series of tiles that you can recruit in a line, sort of like in Patchwork, and on your turn you're going to take some of these tiles and you put them on a garden board that you have. Now, as you're placing them on the garden board, you're trying not to cover up these flower pots, which are the scoring markers on the board. And you also have these cats that you can place to fill in spots. You can also get the flower pots and put those in, and those will also score as points. And your goal, basically, each time you fill up your board, you score it, and then you can either take points for the water features that you scored, or points for the potting feature, the flower pots. I think you can't take both, but played this a couple weeks ago, so it's already getting a little fuzzy, which maybe tells you how excited I was. And then once you filled the board, you're going to discard the tiles. They go back to the end of the line, where eventually they'll get taken again, and you get a new player board, and you continue. Over the course of the game, as you score either the pots or the water jugs, the cubes that indicate that score are going to climb up on your scoring track. And there's this weird neat mechanism where you have 2 cubes of each color, and when you score them you can choose one of the 2 cubes to move, and as you move it up the score track it gets higher value points, but there might become a point where, like, say you're 3 from the end and you score 4 orange. So the question is, do you take the 4 orange with the lower cube and don't score as many points, or you just take 3 with the higher cube, get to the end of the lane, and then you lose that extra point? There's also a line that you cross. When your cube crosses that line, you get a cat. So there's a little bit of flexibility in where things are going to go or how things come out. All in all, it is a fine tile laying game. It's certainly staying in my collection for the time being. We'll happily play it again. It's a good one to introduce to family and friends because it's pretty light as far as these things go. I would say it's less complicated than New York Zoo, a little more than Patchwork, but not much. I mean, the game takes up more room than Patchwork, but in terms of gameplay difficulty, it's about the same. And I guess I like the theme a little bit better. The theme in Patchwork feels so abstract as to be just abstract. At least Cottage Garden feels a little bit more like a theme. So from that perspective, I'm happy to have it. I don't know if I would be happy to have paid $50 or $60 for it, which is the current retail price, but paying $3 at Goodwill, definitely a good buy for me. That's Cottage Garden from Uwe Rosenberg and Stronghold Games. The next game I want to talk about is a party game that I've just never gotten around to play, and this is Blank Slate. Blank Slate was designed by Bob Camp, who is a Chicago local and comes to my game club occasionally, although, like I said, this is my first chance to have played it. And in fact, I did not play it correctly because Bob is experimenting with some alternate rules, and so I got the gist of it. I think I understand how the game goes, but the scoring that we used in the playtest is not the scoring that's used in the base game. But the general idea of Blank Slate is everybody gets a whiteboard and a whiteboard marker, and then the game comes with hundreds of cards that have phrases on them, and it will be like a two-word phrase with one word and then a blank. And the idea is that you, as the player, are going to hear that phrase, the word and then a blank, and then you're going to write down what you think goes in the blank. And then your goal is to have the same thing on your board that other people have on theirs. So you're looking for matches. It's a relatively simple game as far as party games go, but it's really accessible, easy to teach, fun to play. It's one of those games where you can pick it up, play it for a few minutes, put it down, or you don't feel anything bad about the go. It's very accessible and fun to play. So it's definitely falls in that category like Balderdash or Pictionary or categories where I will happily play it at any time. I would say the one downside is trying to match what other players have done is not my favorite mechanism. I far prefer trying to not match what they've done. I guess the push for creativity rather than parallelism is my jam, which maybe is why I really did not like Green Team Wins, which is a game I played at Origins and did not enjoy very much. I don't recall whether or not I talked about it on the show. I think I did, but I did not like that game. So I think that generally trying to match what the other player has done is not my favorite thing. Although the word game that Rob and I are working on does have you trying to match what they've done, but it involves solving a puzzle or a riddle, sort of. So maybe that flexibility makes it more fun for me. Anyway, if you get a chance to try it, I definitely recommend. And definitely if you want a game on your shelf that is a good fit for when you have non-gamer friends over and they want something light that they can, drink and chat while they're playing, this is a perfect game for that. And it's Blank Slate from designer Bob Camp and publisher The Op. All right. Finally, the third game I want to talk about. This is the one that I said was a little different, a little confusing, a little complicated. This is A Study in Emerald. Hold on, Brendan. You talk about A Study in Emerald like every third episode. You've definitely played A Study in Emerald. You didn't let me finish, self. I'm talking about A Study in Emerald, 2nd edition. That's right. I finally got an opportunity to play it. I have a friend who brought it to our game club, and I said, hey, I'd like to try that, and we tried it. So in case you're unfamiliar with this game at all, A Study in Emerald is a board game adaptation by Martin Wallace, my favorite designer, or tied with Vladimir Suchy maybe. I still haven't made that call. But one of my favorite designers. And he took the story of the anarchist resistance to, the anarchist and socialist resistance to nobility and royalty in the 1800s and transferred it into the Neil Gaiman story where the elder gods of Cthulhu are in the royal houses of Europe. So that way, when you're blowing up royals, you're blowing up Cthulhu monsters. It doesn't feel so weird. But it's also got a mix of fictional characters and real life figures, sort of like Nancy Narking. And the first edition, which came out from Wallace's own publishing company, Tree Frog Games, was published through, he kickstarted it. It was one of the first Kickstarters I backed. Has just a very strange arc to it. A really strange set of rules. It's kind of unpolished, and there's a whole bunch of like edge cases and weird rules that change the gameplay dramatically as you're playing. So the game was pretty well received, although it also got some really negative feedback for its difficult to parse rule set, which totally agree, very difficult to parse, and frankly, all of these edge cases that make the game really hard to teach and learn. I've never played a game of A Study in Emerald where we weren't constantly looking at the rulebook. So when A Study in Emerald 2nd edition came out, they commissioned new art, which the cover is amazing, but I don't think most of the new art is that much better than the old art that Martin Wallace had. He went with this sort of pencil design, black and white pencil sketches, which look fine. I think the new art being sort of colored paintings looks a little better, but while the cover art is really evocative, the other one definitely feel not very strong by comparison. Like I don't see the art in the new edition as a leap up from the old edition. But then they also sort of pared down and polished the rules a bit to try to make the game more accessible. And in so doing, some of the things they got rid of don't change gameplay dramatically. Like in the old game, in order to move your agents around, you had to spend coins. And so for every coin you spent, you would get to move an agent along like one of the connection paths, which meant that if you wanted to move from, say, Berlin to New York, or DC, I think was the furthest west you could go, you would have to spend a whole bunch of coins to move your agent from one place to another. In a Study in Emerald, the cards that allow you to move are just going to have a railroad track on them, and for each railroad track you can move one agent from any city to any city. So they get rid of the geography of the board entirely. They got rid of a couple of the decks that there were these sort of super decks that are off on the side of the board. Those were not in the second edition, and they reduced the drama of the win condition. So in the original edition, one of the things that I found most compelling, actually, and I think is a really bold design choice, is that the teams are secret. The teams are secret, and your goal is to have your team, the person who finishes in last place in the game, cannot be on your team. If they are on your team, or I should say in the original edition, person who finishes in last place, everyone on their team loses and then is removed from the score track. And then the people who remain, the highest score is the winner. In the new edition, instead of it being people on the score track lose, and now it's just they lose 5 points. And the game goes to like 22 points, 23 points. So it's still a massive hit to your score. And you have to really actively work against that if you want to stop somebody from doing that. Another big change that I did not like is that the city cards were mixed into the decks. So in the game, the city cards are worth a lot of points, and you get them by taking the city, like you put influence in and then you take the city card. And once you have it, you control the city. And if someone else wants to control the city, you have to go there and like actively work, and then they take the city. And when they take it, then they get that city. You go through your hand and your deck, find the city card and give it to them. So whoever controls the city has the city card in their deck. This is, of course, an idea he took from A Few Acres of Snow. Like that idea was in there. Well, in the new one, the card is just in the deck. So if you happen to have influence in the city, when that card comes up, you can take it. And I will say, the opportunity to play this came at a time when the person who owned it had not fully read the rules and digested them. So, and he didn't really tell us that when he showed it to us. So we ended up playing a bunch of stuff wrong. And so my sense of how the game plays, I'm not really talking about, because it changed so dramatically. I don't think I played the second edition the way it's supposed to. But from the things that I did see that I know were different, I can certainly say I like the first edition better, and I'm glad I didn't sell it to buy the second edition or whatever. So that's A Study in Emerald, second edition from designer Martin Wallace, and I don't know who the publisher of the second edition was. So this is my opportunity as we're wrapping up here to talk to you a little bit about the podcast. If you have not reviewed us on one of the review platforms or the review space for wherever you get your podcasts, would really appreciate having a review. It's great when more people find the show. You can always participate on Board Game Geek in our Guild 3269, where we talk about episodes and other things related to games. You could drop me an email, brendan@rattleboxgames.com, or you could send me a message on Board Game Geek to username wombat929. If you would like to join me for an online game, I play asynchronously at Board Game Arena, Boîte à Jeux, and Yucata.de. All of those are wombat929 as well. So we're about 2/3 of the way through the year, so this is a great time also to ask for any feedback that you have about the podcast. Are there episodes that you would like to see me pursue that I haven't? Are there ideas that you think would make for good episodes that you would like to hear? Which episodes that I've done recently are your favorites? All of these things I'd love to know, and you can share them with me most easily in the Guild, Board Game Geek, Guild 3269. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.